Welcome back everybody to another episode of our weekly Moto News Roundup, where this time we've got updates from KTM, from MV Agusta and from Ducati, some huge plans for Royal Enfield in 2026 and also a slick new look for the Suzuki GSX-8R. Then we've got new bikes from BBM and AJS, and we'll round off with a look at one of India's biggest manufacturers who might be about to launch a stunt bike. But we'll jump in with KTM with their 2026 update to their 890 SMT, which, if you're not familiar, is kind of part supermoto and part tourer, hence the name SMT. It's a bit of an odd combo, a slightly odd-looking bike as well, but one of the ways that they tried to give it a bit of a supermoto vibe was with the high-mounted front mudguard. So it's kind of interesting for 2026 that they've decided to effectively just chop it off. Personally, I can't quite decide whether on the looks front it's for the better or for the worse. On the one hand, it does look a little bit cleaner. It looks more part of the 890 Adventure family with which it shares most of its design, but also you've got to say the last one was kind of distinctive looking, and I do think it's lost some of that uniqueness. I do like though the new paint job for 2026. It now comes in blue and orange, which works quite nicely, and also I think everyone can appreciate the new price. It used to come in at $12,999, but for 2026 they've dropped it by $1,000, so it's now $11,999. I guess KTM have still got a bit of inventory to shift, although I will point out quite a lot of the previous gen bikes are pre-registered but still on sale. So if you do like the high-mounted front mudguard, well, I have seen quite a few pre-reg bikes for like under 10 grand. Is it just me though? Does that KTM headlight, the previous gen, look a little bit old-fashioned now since they've been moving most of their bikes over to that new LED projector insect alien kind of thing? It's divisive. I'm not sure that it's to everybody's taste, but it does look a lot more modern than headlights like this one. Although, to be fair, that could be all about to change with a bit of a shock announcement this week with regards to their designers. You see, for about 35 years now, KTM have been using a company called Kiska, and so pretty much most KTMs in recent memory, plus that really distinctive, recognizable design language, have pretty much come through them. And it's been a deep relationship. At one point, Pira Mobility, the previous KTM parent group, they had 50% ownership of Kiska, although it's steadily dwindled over the past few years, especially with KTM's financial struggles, to the point at this week where Kiska is now independent again. In fact, their CEO, Julian Hergé, said following the repurchase of the last remaining shares from the KTM group by the shareholders, the company from Anif is once again fully independent. Now, at first, I'd assumed that this was part of KTM's recently announced cost-saving exercises, with Indian manufacturer Bajaj, putting in the money and taking control during last year's financial struggles. And they've been very open about the fact that there are some significant changes needed in order to get KTM back to a healthy place. Thing is though, if you read on with the CEO of Kiska's comments, well, it looks like it might have been a two-way street, because he went on to say that the heavy reliance on KTM was unhealthy for Kiska. Now, Austrian motorcycle publication 1000 PS report that 42 Kiska employees were laid off during KTM's financial difficulties, and that left 160 employees. So, 42 employees out of that many. Well, it's a huge impact on a relatively small company. We will never make ourselves dependent again on a single client, said Hergé, and it's easy to see why with that sort of repercussions. And that's not even considering the fact that 1000 PS went on to say that during the self-administration period, well, 70% of what they owed Kiska at the time was written off. So yeah, apparently Kiska's client roster is now a lot more diverse. They've got two-wheelers and four-wheeler clients on the books, and they're, geographically diverse as well, from China, from India, and also companies from the US. Sounds like a smart move after what must have been, a difficult few years. Although naturally it's going to have some impact on the visual design of KTM's in the coming year or two. Immediately, maybe it won't be that apparent. Kiska say they do have still some contracts that are ongoing, and you'd also imagine they've worked on some bikes that are still due for release, but KTM have said that they will be building their own design center in Salzburg, and they say it's to better integrate with their own development and production process. Now, how much that's true, or whether it's cost cutting, or whether it's because Kiska don't want to work with them anymore is not, particularly clear. But either way, it looks like in the next year or two, we'll see bikes from KTM that look a bit more Bajaj perhaps and a bit less Kiska. So is that a good thing or not? I'm sure that not everybody loves the way that KTMs look, but then they do look kind of cool and aggressive, so I'd love to know your take down in the comments below. Undoubtedly a good thing though is MV Agusta's recent announcement that their full suite of techie goodies will come as standard on their entire lineup from now on. Luca Martin, their CEO, said every strategic decision at MV Agusta is driven by a customer-centric mindset. This commitment is what allows us to deliver the full experience as standard with a transparent pricing philosophy and no hidden costs. Maybe a bit of a dig at KTM there, especially considering that brief period where KTM were involved and owned part of MV Agusta. But yeah, anyway, he says, exactly as our customers expect from a premium brand. And I've got to say, if you pay a bit more for an MV, you probably would expect all the bells and whistles to be thrown in. So yeah, as standard, you now get a 6-axis IMU, cornering ABS, 3 riding modes with 1 custom slot, a quick shifter up and down the box, traction control that's switchable and also has 8 levels, front lift control, aka wheelie control, engine brake control, adjustable engine response, throttle map, so low, medium or high, torque settings, so maximum torque, that can go from low, medium, or high as well, a configurable rev limiter, cruise control, a 7-inch or 5.5-inch TFT display, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth connectivity, which gives compatibility with the MV Ride app. And then also they've got GPS tracking built in and also an anti-theft system, which is one of my favorite things actually. I feel like motorcycle manufacturers don't take a great deal of responsibility for security. Take, for example, steering locks, which are super easy to break. And so it's nice to see MV going a little bit further to try and protect your bike. And one would assume as well that maybe an integrated GPS tracker might be a bit more difficult to trace down and remove than something third party that you've just stashed under the saddle. But the main thing you can actually do to stop the bike getting stolen in the first place is to use good locks. And so a massive thanks to our partners at Lightlock for supporting the channel and sponsoring this video. The key thing to understand is that they need to be angle grinder resistant because that's one of the most common ways of defeating motorcycle locks. And if you use something unarmored, something fairly affordable, well, we did a cutting test and it took less than 10 seconds to cut through a regular D-lock. Steering locks, like I say, are super easy to break as well, so you can't rely on those. But both the X1 and the X3 in the Lightlock lineup use their own coating called Baronium, which is angle grinder resistant and sort of turns the power of the angle grinder on itself. That's exactly why when we tried to cut one of their X3s, it shredded 2 discs and we hadn't even got through one side of the lock. And also it pretty much depleted a whole battery for that cordless angle grinder, so it really does stand up to the test. So yeah, head to the link in the description below to pick up yours, and also there's a discount code down there for 15 quid, which you won't find elsewhere on the internet. It's the best discount code they've got. Next up though, we're at Ducati with a new scheme called Factory Made, and this is another one that I'm, a little bit in 2 minds about, so I'd love to know what you guys think. Currently, if you go on the configurator, it's just available for the Multistrada V4. I guess it could quite easily be rolled out to more bikes as well, but basically the idea is you can go and spec up the visuals exactly as you want. It's not quite a full custom scheme like Ducati Unica, but it does give you a lot more options, and then yeah, it gets fulfilled by the factory, so it's factory made. So instead of the usual red or black, quite often Ducatis can be a little bit limited in terms of color choice. Well, there's now 11 finishes to choose from, and then being part of the same VW group as Lamborghini, there's another 5 of Lambo's palette, and they cost a little bit more. I think they're more like 1,500 quid. Then you can choose the color of the subframe, you can choose the wheels as well, including spoked for off-road or some lightweight forged rims, and you can even go as far as choosing the color of the brake calipers as well, so you can get them to match if you so wish. Now on the one hand, more choice is a good thing usually for the customer, and there are some pretty good color combinations available for the Multi V4, but on the other, I've made some absolute abominations. Even with just this bike on the configurator, you can really get some jarring combos. And so like I said, I'd love to know from you, should you be able to spec it as you want, especially if you're paying for a relatively expensive motorcycle, Or should motorcycle design be left to the experts, including the paint? Also this week, Ducati went on record as saying they have absolutely no intentions of developing a self-driving or riding motorcycle, which isn't always the case for other manufacturers. Take Honda, for example. They released that concept of a self-balancing motorcycle, which presumably is for like car drivers or something. And also they filed patents around like a power steering system, which they say could help with lane keeping, for example. The head, though, of North American Ducati said, "I hope I never see the day," and that a self-riding bike would take away the entire reason to ride a motorcycle, which I really agree with. We're not building mobility, we're building motorcycles. We're building something for joy and fun. I think fairly often on this show, we read interviews and quotes from senior management at motorcycle companies, and they seem a little bit off the mark, but I've got to say, he's bang on. Another bit of Ducati news though, before we move on from them, the Panigale V4, the latest one from 2025, just picked up another design award with the 2025 Good Design Award. That's the third for 2025, so the IF Design Award, the Red Dot Award as well. And so that'll probably have you thinking, well, this must be almost design perfection. I'm not sure though. I mean, I do understand that they're chasing performance, and so they've made some good technical updates to it, like the double-sided swing arm for more grip at lean, and it's got less weight as well. But I think on the aesthetics, I think I still prefer the previous gen, which just looked a touch more aggressive. In fact, it makes me think of this really cool graphic by Carl Lee on Instagram, which compares the evolution of Ducati's sports bike design over the past few decades. When did it peak is the question for you. My favorites off that graphic would be obviously the 916, the 999, I think, as well, as just aged really, really well. And then, yeah, the 2019, the Panigale V4R he's got on there. But I'll put a link to that post down in the description so you can head over and leave a comment. Next up, though, big news from Royal Enfield, with some seriously ambitious plans for 2026 outlined on a recent investors call. According to their parent group, Ica Motors, they're planning to up production to a massive 2 million units per year, with a bit of an expansion of their current manufacturing capabilities. 2026 as well, they say, will be a really significant year, with the introduction of 6 new models. Now, we already can make a good guess at a couple. We've seen spy shots and test bikes of a 750 Continental GT Cafe Racer. They've publicly confirmed they're building a 750 twin-powered version of the Himalayan adventure bike as well. But that still leaves another 4 bikes, and even though I read almost every motorcycle news website every day, even though I get spy shots and look at patent applications, copyrights, and stuff like that, I haven't seen anything about the remaining 4. And so if you've got a clue, leave a comment, or just let me know what you'd love to see Royal Enfield build next. Over at Suzuki though, MCM report on a new graphics pack that's available for the GSX-8R middleweight sports bike, which you can actually pick up through an official Suzuki dealer. You see, it is from a third party called GP Graphics. It costs around 225 quid plus fitting, or you can install it yourself if you like a bit of self-inflicted stress. But I suppose the appeal of this might be the fact that it's from the dealer. So if you do want to add it as an accessory, I'd imagine you can probably throw it in as part of your finance if you do finance a new GSX-8R. And I actually think it really improves the looks of that bike. I think it suits it really nicely, so definitely one to consider. Next up, there are a couple of new bikes that caught my eye. This one was on German publisher MOTOBOB online, with the details of a new electric bike from Spanish brand BBM. And I've got to say, I really like the look of this one. It's one of the most appealing looking electric bikes I've seen so far, with a trellis frame, some nice looking bodywork as well, the single headlight up front, and even those mismatched wheels with the spoke wheel up front and the disc at the back. It does look kind of cool. On top of that though, the specs actually make for pretty decent reading as well. They say it'll come in at about 200 kilograms, which is respectable certainly for an electric, and also it'll make 94 horsepower peak, which ain't at all bad either. That, they say, is good enough for 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 3.5 seconds, so that's 0 to 62, which again is pretty flipping good. Although I think the thing most people will be interested in is the range and charging time. Now they say up to 225 kilometers is possible, or 140 miles. Although I would expect that's a mix of, stop-start riding rather than straight on motorway or open road. But they do say if you can find a fast charger that an 80% charge can take as little as 15 minutes. Even on a standard socket, it's 2 hours 40 for 80% as well, which I don't think is too bad at all. And price-wise, it's they say they estimate 16,900 euros, so not mind-blowingly expensive either. I think that would come in at around 14,800 pounds in the UK, or $19,900 as a crude direct currency conversion, not allowing for any import fees and that sort of stuff. Looks pretty good though, although if it's out of budget, then maybe consider this next one, which is a new 125 from British heritage brand made in Asia, AJS. I caught this one on the Italian site Moto.it. I think it's really nicely styled, and so while it only makes about 13 horsepower peak, I still think it'd make for an awesome bike to own if you were on a learner license. It's called the JFT 125. It's got a bit of that rugged scrambler look about it, and it comes in super light at just 128 kilograms in running order, so absolutely perfect for the novice rider. And that's with a 14-litre tank, so for a 125 that's a lot. It should do some really serious range. And like I say, price-wise, this is certainly at the more affordable end of the spectrum. It comes in at about $3,000. Very nice indeed if you want something, for the learner, but still with a little bit of style about it. What about this one though, the RTR Hyper Stunt? It was shown off as a concept at EICMA in 2025 and has some of the hallmarks of a stunt bike, with the punchy graphics, the grab rail at the rear, and also the stunt pegs on each axle. We're pretty used to wacky concepts at motorcycle shows, not least of all EICMA as well, so maybe it wouldn't surprise you to see it there, but I was a little bit surprised to see on Cycle World that they've actually found the design filings for it, and so that could be an indication that it's about to go into production. Now these images do show a bike without mirrors or indicators, or in fact any lighting, nor a license plate, and so I'd imagine it wouldn't be a road legal production bike. But with that 299cc single that they also make for the BMW 310s, well, it could be a very approachable way to get into stunt riding. So perhaps come into a car park at midnight near you soon. But as always, I'd love to know from you what you thought of the stories this week, so do leave a comment below. And also I'll put our last week of content on the screen now in a playlist in case you missed any and want to catch up. Do hit subscribe for more of the latest motorcycle news and reviews like this right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.